Okay. All right. I think we're good to go here. By the way,
Okay,
so
cool. Yeah.
let me just double check. Yeah, beautiful. All right.
Cool.
Cool. So yeah. So you wanted to talk about property,
Yeah.
and you also took an issue to some of the videos that I posted or people's opinions. So what would you like to dive into first?
Oh, look, let's talk about the housing crisis. I think personally, two biggest issues right now facing everyone here. Well, not everyone, but most people, I'd have to say, is the housing crisis and also the cost of living issues as well that we're having. So to me, they stand out, head and shoulders above anything else at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and can you expand on that? Just, I guess, treat it like I don't know anything about it.
Okay. All right, because I don't want to move too much. Obviously, I'm not sure how much detail to go into, but look, I'll give you some a bit of a rundown, throw some numbers at you that might make you realise or look at it from a different angle and see what's going on. But I mean, at the moment, we have two crises running at the same time concurrently, right? And in my lifetime, I've never seen that happen before. And I've been the rental game, as a property investor for now over 30 years. And when I say two crises run at the same time, I'm talking about number one being the affordability issue. So people trying to get into the market. All right. So we've had, obviously, since around the year 2000 or early 2000s, we've had property prices pretty much outstrip average median prices on salary. And the other crisis we have at the moment is a rental crisis. So normally you would have Connor in people out there going, oh, gee, look, I can't afford to buy, but what I'll do is I'll rent. But now rent is becoming a massive issue as well. Rents have gone through the roof, and there's a variety of factors there. So you've got a double-edged sword here, in effect.
Yeah. So what do you think has led to both of these crises?
Look, I would say a lot of it's got to do with government policies. Okay, I think they keep telling us about the old supply and demand issue, and when you talk about supply and demand, well, you know what? If you're bringing in over 1 million people over the last 18 months since COVID lockdowns, well, where are you going to house them? So this is a big issue, and then coupled with that, you've also got other factors with interest rates, and you've got also governments now. Really, well, state government and federal governments going with some ambitious plans. I think the big one is, and if you just looked at yesterday's paper alone, Connor, you would have realised they talked about the government's grand plan of building 240,000 dwellings every year since July last year. Well, apparently, according to the news I read yesterday, they're 70,000 short already. So this is a plan that's never been undertaken before by any federal government, from what I understand. So they're trying to create history, and history's against them.
Yeah, and so if you're in charge of Victoria and or Australia right now, what actions would you take to try and get us back on the right track?
Well, look, you're going to get a very biased opinion right here, mate, because I'm a bit of a property investor myself, school teacher, a background. But the interesting thing was I used to vote Labor for pretty much all my working life. And it's only been the last 5 to 10 years where I've actually gone 180 degrees on that whole issue, because I'm finding the same people I used to vote for are the same people attacking my nest egg. And when I say attacking my nest egg, I mean in terms of something that you would have heard of by now, land tax. That's been, in my case personally, gone up 330% in the last 10 years. And I can't think of too many things that go up at least on average 30% every year for the last 10 years. Yeah. How the hell does a landlord want to stay in the game? So when they start doing that sort of thing, and then they also start hitting you with what they call compliance laws and rules, where you have to basically meet minimal standards, someone like me says, well, you know what? I'll keep jacking up the rent to cover those costs. And you can only go so far, mate, before the tenants start saying, you know what? I just can't meet that. And the other one is I sell, get out of the market, which is what I've started to do right now. Last year, I floated my family home, all right, that I grew up in. And it's a shame that I had to get to that because, with all these rules and regulations and land tax, the return on investment, Connor, is no longer there for anyone who's a landlord, especially in Victoria, because we are the most taxed state as far as landlords are. And you know what? If you had to listen to the Greens, you would think that the landlords, property investors, were a criminal class in their own. So
yeah, so this is an issue that is actually a little close to my heart as well, because my parents, they own a couple of properties, a couple of blocks right next to each other on the Great Ocean Road, their land tax went from $5,000 a couple of years ago across the two properties to $70,000 the next year.
That's
the very next year.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they're forced to be in this position where they're going, okay, we just can't sustain this anymore. So they're actually going to subdivide their 2 blocks into 4. But because they're subdividing 2 different bits of land, it activates a clause. I'm not sure if you've heard about this, where they need special approval from the council to make sure that the land isn't some Indigenous heritage land. So they need to get an Aboriginal person from a private organisation out to check the dirt in the land to make sure it's not heritage, which costs them $60,000 for one day. I
can't believe I heard that. I cannot believe.
Yeah.
So does that include the smoking ceremony that goes with it?
Well, yes, I'm not sure exactly what happens on that day. I couldn't believe it when I first heard about it either. And then I started speaking to a few people about it, and people have come across this before, and this is a real thing, which I just couldn't believe. And so it's the fact that you need the approval from the council to say that it's not heritage land or dirt in the land, and then that costs you $60,000 around about that from a private organisation. And I can't imagine it's going to take them more than a few hours. So I can't believe some of this stuff.
Look, can I be honest with you? I think this is a sore point for a number of people. I think it's the tide's turning as far as this woke business is concerned. Welcoming the country. I mean, look, my ancestors came to this country in the early 50s. I have nothing to apologise for or feel guilty about anything that I've done personally. But yet this is the sort of thing that's thrown down our throat, shoved down our throat daily. And I know this is not about the housing crisis, and you've sort of touched on something that's another issue that burns within me as well, and that is what part of no don't people get when we voted as a nation on the referendum? No means no. Stop trying to bring it in at other levels like council or state with treaties and whatnot. To me, it's a blanket no. And I'll tell you what, the issue like Australia Day that's come up every year now, Connor, in my opinion, if we had a vote on it right now, it would be defeated even more resounding than the referendum was. We'd probably get closer to 70%. But it's the silent majority, unfortunately, that don't get activated about this sort of stuff, don't get triggered like the activists do. And it's that, the minorities, and I use the key word minorities, that have activists that are carrying on like 2 bob watchers in the city, thinking they can actually hijack agendas. And what's even more disappointing with all of that is we've got corporates like Woolworths getting involved, trying to tell you and me how we should think, who we should vote for, what are the issues. Even more ridiculous was the Hong Kong-based Australian Venue Co. I don't know if you heard about it. They own about 200 pubs or bars in Australia.
No, I haven't heard about this. No.
Okay, well, here they are talking about cancelling or not calling it Australia Day at their venues, right, because they felt that it was going to be a sensitive issue to some of their employees. Now, this is an overseas-based company, mate. So why are they sticking their noses, these corporates, into issues that really have nothing to do with them? Qantas flew a big yes on the back of their planes for so long. And the list goes on, mate. And going back to this smoking business, ceremonies or whatever you want to call it, welcome to the country, that's costing taxpayers up to $500,000, they just told us the other month. Someone's making a dollar out of this, and your guess is as good as mine where we're going to with this. But like I said, as far as I'm concerned, no means no. And that means I don't care what level or what form you want to bring it in, whether it be a state treaty type thing or whatever. And again, who's paying for it? You and I, mate, through taxes. And
Isn't it strange? You mentioned Qantas and other organizations like that flying the flag and the yes flag. But, I saw something a couple of years ago when, all the Pride stuff is still going on, but it was really popular for companies to change their logos on social media to a Pride logo, right? And you looked at these companies' social medias and their Middle Eastern branches didn't change to a Pride logo and didn't post any of the stuff about the Pride logo because they do it for money, right? They don't actually care about the issues and driving the issues. They do it where it's already popular to try and think, But the interesting thing about Qantas flying that flag is it obviously wasn't the popular idea because we voted so vehemently against it. The other thing I'll say about that as well is I got a lot of perspective recently because I was asking, obviously, people, should we celebrate Australia Day? And that was in and around Melbourne. And obviously this is probably our most, left-wing progressive state and city in all of Australia.
And divisive, very divisive, mate. It's very divisive across the country, this whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. And then I actually just got back from a trip to Queensland and, there's so many more Australian flags there. People would sort of look at you funny if I didn't ask anyone the question up there, but if I was to ask people the question, I think I would have gotten, very different answers. So
I think so, mate, depending on what pocket you go to. And let's be honest, Queensland are a fair bit more conservative, I think, than what we are. I think here, like you said, I think if you want to talk about left-wing, socialist inclined, leaning tendencies, Victoria's got to be number one. It's been sorry, I shouldn't swear, but it's been canned for a lot of that stuff. This woke, look, the DEI stuff. You know what DEI is?
Yeah.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, look, again, not that I care much for Trump's politics, but some of the things I do like. But that was one of those things where he says, I'm not going to be, basically, I'm going to go into this not being colourblind, or being colourblind. In other words, he's not going to look at skin colour anymore to determine who should get certain jobs. I mean, and that's the way we've gone in a lot of these areas. Whatever happened to merit? If you're either good enough or you're not. Don't tell me you get the job just because of your genitalia or your skin colour. That's what we've been reduced to, mate. How can I not get upset about looking at that sort of stuff? I don't know how you feel about it, but I've been in the teaching game, and I'll tell you another thing too, mate. In the teaching game the last 10 years, and I'll say it right now, mate, every second graduate coming out of college was wearing a rainbow lanyard and had a rainbow sticker or an Indigenous flag, okay? And I'm thinking to myself, who's pushing agendas here? And I asked the question, are universities about education or indoctrination? I got to ask that question, mate. There's a big difference right there. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah. So I definitely have my own opinions about it, and obviously I try to stay unbiased in my videos. But I am curious to know, because in your experience, you're a secondary school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And did you feel any of that sort of pressure come through in the secondary school system, or is that more in the universities?
Well, I felt it coming through because obviously the products of the university system are ending up on our doorstep in the schools. Okay, so we even had, and I won't mention any names, of course, but we had, I remember a particular teacher try to go around and slap some big rainbow flags on staff rooms, on staff room doors and windows, that sort of thing. And they were pulled down pretty quick by the assistant principal. Again, people think that they can push their agenda anywhere they want without actually thinking about it, Look, like I said, I don't want to debate this sort of stuff too much because, some people do feel that it's an invasive. But look, going back to what you said about the Middle Eastern countries back then, I'll just pick up on that point. Here we have people demonstrating saying queers for Palestine. Really? Queers over there would be stoned, mate. To death. Yeah. So where on earth do they think that that's all of a sudden, yeah, right, okay, that's a support group?
Yeah.
I scratch my head and I wonder, mate, every day of the week.
Yeah. So, okay. So I am curious to know, obviously I know where you stand on these issues, but what do you think specifically is the problem with these people pushing the pride agenda and flying the pride flag everywhere, when their defense and their argument is, well, why can't I just be whoever I want to be? And how does it bother you?
Okay. That's a very good question. And my answer to that is pretty simple. I don't mind what you stand for, what you want to identify as, pronouns, whatever. But stop parading it in my face. I don't need a catwalk in front of me every bloody day, shoved down my throat. That's the issue I have, mate. I know these people have always existed. That's not a problem. We all accept that. But now it's front and center. That's what I have the issue with. I get it. I understand. But look, the Victorian government just recently, she marched Jacinta Allen, right, who I referred to as a clone of Dan Andrews minus the North Face jacket, right? She was very much proud to walk and march with the Pride fraternity out there. But if you ask them why they didn't have walk and march with the Pride Australia Day fraternity out there. But if you ask them why they didn't have COVID. Okay, COVID's long gone. Why haven't we reinstated that? You get what I'm saying? So you can see where her priorities lie. But like I said, I'm proud of this country, and I'm afraid it's becoming more and more divisive the way I see it daily. You know what I mean? These sorts of issues were not around when I was growing up, mate. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, nah, not seen at all. But why is it now that we're copying all this sort of stuff? And as I said to you, I think the government's got a lot to blame for, right, for doing this. They're giving them oxygen. They're giving them fuel to be able to do these protests every weekend on the steps of Parliament House. As far as I'm concerned, if I was a business owner in the CBD, I'd be pretty pissed off with this sort of stuff affecting my business. So in
the 70s and 80s and 90s, what were there fringe issues or issues that, you know, the right saw they thought the left was going absolutely crazy on, or was everything a little bit more moderate in general?
I think, look, there's always been resistance. There's always been protests, mate. And I understand that. And fair enough, you know, power to these people who want to protest about something. They're not happy. We live in a democracy. But I'll go back to the referendum part, and I'll say to you, okay, so as a protester, and I spoke to some guy the other day on the train station on Australia Day. I was going into the march, and I've never done this before. I was going into the march in Port Melbourne to walk for Australia Day, right, flying the flags. The unfortunate thing was only about 500 of us that turned up or so. Meanwhile, this guy was going off with his Indigenous flags, and he had the Palestinian and Indigenous flag pin on his thing. And I sort of questioned, really, how can you equate those two? And he said he went down the path of genocide or something. And I thought to myself, very different causes. I don't think the Indigenous have something like Hezbollah or Hamas in that group to go around. And I'm not going to use the word starting with T, but you can see where I'm going with it. Totally different causes, mate, and totally different issues. But anyway, that's just the way I feel about the whole issue, mate. And I shouldn't be feeling as passionate as I do about these things that I do right now.
Well, I don't think, you know, I don't think you can feel bad about feeling so passionate about it, because from my experience, I've met a lot of people that do feel so passionately like you do about these issues, against these issues, because what's coming at them from the left is so much passion from the other side, right? And so much virtue signaling and all of that sort of stuff.
Moral grandstanding, yep, exactly.
Yeah, to the point where I've met some more moderate people on the left that are quite pissed off with the direction that people think their side is going, right? Where the people where you can actually have a conversation with them without offending them, and you know, don't believe in a lot of the DEI stuff, but they do have more left-wing values, and they're not really represented by anyone anymore. And I think you might have seen that reflected in Trump's victory, where the Democrats just seemed to push it so far that, you know, everyone was sort of like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's a hot topic, mate, and I'll admit that thing. But yeah, look, I don't know where we're going with all of this, mate. I really don't know. I feel unfortunately a bit frustrated, a bit sad, because we want unity, mate. We want to be united on these things, and instead, what like I said to you, what's been happening the last 5 to 10 years is the opposite. We're becoming more and more. The referendum itself, mate, was very divisive. If you recall back, I remember members of my family arguing one way or the other, as well. You know. So,
I'm the same.
You know, give them a voice, okay. But look, like I said to you, we voted with our feet, literally, and that's the decision. And yet, a lot of these people will not, you know, buy it. Okay, you know, you can sell it as much as you want, but they're not buying it. There's only certain aspects they want to accept. Going back to what you were mentioning before about the two types of people, as far as I'm concerned, that turn up to these activist demonstrations in the city, for example. You got the activist who says, I want to change the date, right? On Invasion Day, right, they call it. All right, so I want to change the date. But then there's another particular activist there who's bashing the can or the drum regarding down with the colony, right? They what do they want to do? They want to rip down the whole Westminster system. And yet the hypocrisy about the whole thing is you've got people like Lydia Thorpe. Sorry, that's Freudian slip of the tongue. She seems to be a virus. Anyway, look, she will push that whole narrative as well, and yet she's happy to take the purse that the Westminster system provides for her, right? Whether it be a pension, of fat pension in most cases, and these politicians get, but she's happy to accept certain parts. And how did she get in there? What oath did you swear on, or Bible, or whatever? How did she get in there? I mean, she's there to represent the public, not get out there and carry on like down with the system.
Yeah.
Again, this is just nuts.
Yeah. So, do you think that? So, what's your opinion on the Liberal Party at the moment?
Okay, good question. I've turned more conservative, as I said to you. I've been a Labor voter all my life, pretty much, because as a teacher, it's no secret, the Labor Party would probably open the door more so for negotiations and look after teachers more so. Okay, that's a pretty obvious thing. However, as I said to you earlier in this particular interview, I said that I've also, in that 35 years, I've managed to accrue a few properties on the side, okay? And then I find it's the same people in the red corner that are attacking my nest egg, okay? They've been demonising and punishing property investors so much so that I, as I said, like you mentioned with your land tax down on the Great Ocean Road, and the same thing applies with where else I was going to say, Mornington Peninsula. If you go that way, you'll find that there's a lot of people who are selling up places that they once had, maybe their parents had bought down at Rosebud, Dramana, are selling them for the same reason, mate. There's just no point hanging on to it. And unfortunately, unless you're prepared to sell it to someone who is prepared to live there and make that their primary residence, you're stuck with a property that's going to be, copping land tax going up every year. It's not metropolitan where someone's going to move in there and make it their primary residence. So if it's not primary residence, you're up for land tax every time. And it's a scary thought, mate. But like I said, my thoughts on the way this government's tackling this issue is not good at all. Not good at all, both federally and state, especially state. Okay, they're just, like I said, I'll give you another example. I feel also that I've pretty much lost my rights as a landlord of this particular property. I question who actually owns it. And I'll give you an example. The example is my son moved out of home about 6 months ago. And he moved into one of my little rental properties. Little unit he moved into. Now, for me to evict the previous tenants that were in there, I had to go down to the police station in front of a justice of the peace and get a sworn stat dec. Okay, sign a stat dec with the reasons why I was evicting these tenants. It had to be a valid reason in the eyes of VCAT or the law at the moment. So you can't evict without a fault or no fault sort of thing, they call it, right? So it's got to be a reason, a valid reason. And now I ask you the question, mate, I own this property and I've got to give a reason as to why I'm getting you out of there. Okay, I seem to think that I've just got no hand at all in this sort of matter anymore, mate. And the answer is pretty simple. I'm going to sell. I'm sick and tired of basically bending over as a personal ATM machine for this mob. I really am. They're just taxing, and they've got a debt that's so big, mate. I don't know if you know, but it's Queensland's, New South Wales, and Tasmania's put together. This is the state government.
I didn't know that stat. Yeah, I knew it was bad, but wow.
Well, we're fast approaching $200 billion, mate. That'll be clocked up in the next 2-3 years, I'm guessing, from what I can see, projected figures. That's a scary thought, mate. It's like you and me, mate, trying to buy down in Toorak, right? Let's put it in property terms. It's like you and me wanting to buy a house in Toorak or Brighton, where all we can afford is Melton. And I don't mean to be negative with the people in Melton, but I'm picking one of the cheaper suburbs going around. But you and I now, how are we going to be paying back, assuming we get a loan, how are you going to pay back that loan? Which is the same thing that the state government's doing. They're going down the path of building a white elephant, which is the suburban railway. Really? I heard someone best sum it up by saying, gee, it's going to cater for the Asians going from Box Hill to bloody Southland. That's great. It's going to save them time.
Yeah.
Look, in an ideal world, build the bloody thing. But when you're cash strapped as a government, shouldn't you be prioritising? Okay? Pick your targets, and again, politics plays a lot. I remember the East-West link being an issue years ago when they cancelled it. Dan Andrews stepped in and said, no, we're not doing that. And look, the reason why he cancelled it is because it's the other team's idea, not because it didn't make sense. And that's the sort of politics you're putting up with. These idiots are so short-sighted. But how does the freeway, the Eastern Freeway, which has got, 5-6 lanes, all of a sudden end up as a T intersection? And tell me at Hoddle Street, that doesn't make sense to make some sort of, a continuation of that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, you mentioned obviously prioritizing a little bit more, but if you were in power right now, what sort of things would you do to try and reduce our debt?
Okay. Well, number one, I think they need to realize that in the rental market alone, right? The rental market alone, we have literally 90% of the rental properties owned by private people like myself. Okay, so 10% is all you're getting from the government, right? Social and public housing. I don't know if people realize that, because if you get your head around that, and then you're saying I'm going to start building a ton of houses, right, which the government have rarely ever done before, right? Okay, they've left it to the private person. Okay, and they've also come down on foreign investors big time as well, not allowing them to basically bring in money and build apartments, units. But as far as debt is concerned, mate, seriously, chop some of those projects. That's the first thing I would do. Chop the projects. Suburban Rail Loop will be the first one to go. Okay, I wouldn't even look at that. And it's probably one of the biggest projects on the map at the moment for Victoria.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think, in a message to me earlier that you had some opinions about energy as well. Is that right?
Well, yeah, look. I don't know if you follow what's going on, but I think, again, looking at one of your particular YouTube clips, I was astounded at the number of people who had no idea what was going on. I've done a lot of reading. Video? Sorry?
In the climate change video that I did?
Correct, yeah. I think some people didn't even know what climate change meant, or, you know. But I just thought to myself, yeah, look, that's a hot topic as well. Personally, have you heard the expression net zero?
Yep.
Okay. Now, depending on who you speak to, mate, some people will say this is fantasy world. Okay, you ain't going to get there. Let me ask you something. What percentage do you think of carbon emissions is Australia responsible for, as a percentage?
Oh, gee, I'd have to say worldwide, it's got to be less than 1%, right?
It's 1%, if that, right? Yeah. Okay. So, and when you hear that China and India are opening up coal mines and so forth at dozens per month, do you really think that we're going to make a big difference? We're virtue signaling here. That's what you've brought up before, and that's exactly right. We're tearing ourselves inside out, upside down to do what? To bring in a particular form of energy which is not reliable baseload energy, right? You're relying on sun rays and farts, right? Let's put it simple. Sun rays and farts to run. Do you think Melbourne's alight at night because of batteries?
I don't think so.
No, correct. I don't think so. And I think Barnaby Joyce summed it up pretty well. Not that I'm a big fan of that guy either, but he said part-time energy for a full-time economy. It's just ridiculous. And it's costing an arm and a leg. If you see what's going up in Queensland, they're bulldozing hectares and acres of rainforest and so forth to put up turbines. And it's, you're ruining the landscape to try and save it. That's the hypocrisy about the whole thing with renewables. I'd see it's amazing. Yeah, it's got a place in the market. I understand that, but not to rely on it. And if you want to get anywhere close to net zero, from my understanding, nuclear would be the ultimate form of energy. Okay, it's got a superb base load. And look, but unfortunately, you've got too many people that hear the word nuclear and go, geez, Chernobyl, Fukushima. Look, we're nowhere near a fault line like that with Chernobyl, or have the recklessness to operate that sort of stuff like the Russians did back then, right? I think we've learned a lot of things since 40 years ago, right? And I would say to you that that's going to be one way if you want to achieve net zero or get closer to it. But like I said to you, it seems to be, wishful thinking that we're going to, renewables are going to save the day. I don't see batteries ever storing that sort of energy to run a city. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen, mate. That's just my opinion,
Well, that's one that's puzzled me. I don't understand, and perhaps it's because I don't understand the issue well enough, but I don't understand why people aren't more keen on nuclear and why that's not even a discussion that's a big topic.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm glad you said that, because you know what? Every time you ask the question to someone else, what are the key issues going into the next federal election? The energy debate should be first and foremost, along with cost of living, all right, and housing. They're the three things really you should be looking at. For me, the nuclear debate let me ask you something again. How many nuclear reactors do you reckon are on this planet at the moment?
Gee, I would have no idea. Genuinely zero.
Would you be surprised if I told you just over 400?
Yeah.
There you go. So tell that to the bozos on the street. They've got no idea, right? So
400 that are active in use, are they?
Wow. Correct. Okay. And a lot of them are scattered through Europe, right? Again, when you start looking into it and researching, you start realizing just how ignorant you were at the beginning, not knowing enough about it. It's a reliable form of energy, and we've come a long way since those Chernobyl days, right? So people hear that and they think of three eyes and, I don't know, two heads or something, or whatever they're visualizing or something. And that was a campaign, by the way, that was started by the ALP having a go as soon as Dutton announced his nuclear thing. And again, just hopeless, pathetic attempt.
So are there any other reasons why people are opposed to nuclear? Like I'm actually just trying to understand it, because to me that seems like a very silly reason to be opposed to it.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest one is the waste. I think it's how you dispose of the waste, which is the biggest issue, I think, with nuclear stuff. Look, there's a cost involved, just like there would be. But, look at the word renewable. You are going to be renewing it every so often. Okay, turbines only have a certain life expectancy, so do the solar panels, right? All of that sort of stuff needs to be kept up. You've got to clean solar panels. They don't work well when they're covered in dust and crap. Turbines as well, they have a certain lifespan again. And again, like I said to you, if the wind isn't blowing, it ain't going to work. If the sun isn't shining, the panels are not going to work. So what keeps everything going at nighttime? You can pump as much as you can back into the grid, and you get a question then, is the grid capable of taking that sort of stuff as well? But I don't know, mate. I don't know enough about it. I'm not an engineer, but I know a mate of mine who is. An electrical engineer who happened to work for a supercharger company that was rolling out these superchargers for EVs. And he told me a few things, mate, that a lot of people don't know. He said to me, this is a classic. He said to me, I think he was working for BP. They were rolling these out. And he said, when they're designing these particular chargers, they're operating at the highest level of risk from the word go. In other words, catastrophic. That's how scary this sort of stuff is. It's the heat generated, of course, every time the faster you want to pump in electrons into your batteries, the more heat's generated, right? So that's the issue. And you would have heard of thermal runaways and all this sort of stuff. Have you come across that terminology?
No, I haven't. No, enlighten me.
Thermal runaways, basically, if a lithium-ion battery in an EV car goes up, it's almost like watching an oxy welder go. The flames come out, shoot out, and you can't put it out by conventional means that the fire brigade would, right, with water. You almost got to let it burn out on its own right, and it's scary stuff. It'll take down everything else around it too, right? So there's that issue. So, and this mate of mine is actually a cousin's spouse. He said to me he wouldn't go anywhere near putting these chargers up against his house or on a wall. They're just that bloody darn dangerous. So, and what do you think? A couple of things. The other thing is that is passionate for me is electric vehicles, EVs. And again, I could talk for a while about that and tell you that, secondhand EVs are worth virtually nothing. They depreciate faster than a lead weight, The other thing with EVs is you can go to a service station, mate, and it doesn't matter how many cars are at the pumps. They're all going to fill up at the same time. You're out of there in 5 minutes. You rock up at a charging station, while you're doing a road trip, you could end up finding half are out of order. There's a queue of people trying to get in. So there goes, you could be there for hours, right, before you even get charged up. And the more people that are at the chargers, the slower that your charging is going to be. And you have to have the right app to get onto the charger there. The list goes on. Insurance is going through the roof on EVs, and ask me why. I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Even in the slightest of accidents, a little bit of a doof, superficial stuff, the insurance companies err on the side of caution. They write off EVs because they don't know whether these batteries have been compromised in any shape or form. All right? It only takes one cell to be knocked out of alignment or whatever. It's a ticking time bomb. So they write the car off. And that's what's pushing insurance up on EVs. Again, that's something people don't want to talk about. But if you do your homework and look into it, you'll find that these things are not for everyone. I don't know. That's just more questions I've got, more concerns about that sort of infrastructure and that sort of technology, mate.
Yeah. So do you think, first of all, how likely do you think it is that Dutton wins the next election? And are you certainly hoping for that? Do you think that he can get us back on the right track?
At the moment, I think, look, best case scenario, yeah, he'll get up in on his own right. But my fear is that we'll have Mr. Airbus Elbow get in with a minority government, and you'll have the Greens dictating a lot more of the policies. That's my concern. And my opinion, the Greens is, and they're far from what the Greens were back in the 80s when Bob Brown was going around, who actually cared about the environment. These guys these days seem to be, and I regard them, and I'll describe them pretty simple, as communists masquerading as tree huggers. That's what I think of the Greens. And Lord help us if they get in and will have a say in a minority government, because we're gonna be feeling more of this same crap that we're going through right now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? Do you think? Look, I don't know. I don't feel that confident about Dutton getting in just yet, but the energy thing will be the crucial one. I think if people, look into it and see it, yeah, okay, that could be a way to go. I think the by-elections coming up will have something to say about it as well, down in Werribee and Paran this Saturday. I think that might give us an indication, but I don't know. How do you think things will go?
Yeah, I'm wondering if what happened in America with Trump getting in the fashion that he did will have a little bit of a flow-on effect into Australia. Because from what I've noticed myself in just people that I talk to, certainly people are a lot less afraid to come out as right-wing now, and talk about their right-wing opinions. And it's becoming a little bit more popular in the mainstream, I believe. So I just wonder if that's going to start to happen. And, obviously everyone knows the economy's been a disaster since COVID and all of that as well. I think that's a big issue for a lot of people. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dutton wins, but we'll see.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Look, let's be honest too. The ALP are, rubbing their hands together, hoping that there's an interest rate cut between now and May the 17th or whenever it is that they call the election, because my understanding is it has to be on or before the 17th of May. And if they do call an election, they're hoping for a rate decrease. But I think people surely are not that stupid to think, hang on a minute, we've had 12 or 13 increases in the previous 18 months, or whatever. So one ain't going to do much. And like I said, the cost of living thing has been happening under Elbow's watch, to be honest.
So one thing that I've learned while doing these videos is that the average person that I talk to on the street really just doesn't know or doesn't care about a lot of these issues. I did do a video.
Me, mate. That's what triggered me. I couldn't believe that I was, and these are the people who are going to go into a polling booth, mate, in the next month or so, or a couple of months. That's scary, mate, when people are actually clueless. At least take an interest. Vote with your wallet. I don't know, vote for something, right? Look at what you've got. Look who you think is going to best represent you. And people, like I said, the apathy I saw in your interviews, mate, I thought to myself, really, if I could hit him there with a baseball bat and slap him out of that just dazed state, I don't know, mate. Like I said, I was really getting jacked off with the people, the caliber of people you were interviewing. I thought I've got to reach out to you, mate.
No, absolutely. Well, look, that just happens to be the everyday people, and certainly in young circles, I'm 23, right? But most of the people that I know that are around my age really don't take much of an interest in this sort of stuff at all. And what they do is they vote according to almost what looks good on social media. With today's social media age, I've especially found that with young women. Most of them, by default, if they don't know anything, will vote left wing, because that's just sort of the thing you do if you're a young person and you don't know anything. And I think that's how the Greens have become popular in the way that they have as well.
If you look at the state of play, when they break it down, you look at the people as they get older, the Greens become less favoured, right? If you look at the 55s and over, there's barely 5% that vote Greens. So what's that telling you? Are you familiar with the actress Holly Valance or Holly Candy?
No, I'm not. No.
Holly Valance. She's the one. It was a singer, and she also played in the movie Taken with Liam Neeson in the first one.
Right.
Do you remember?
Okay. Yes, yeah, anyway, I know the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, you know the movie. Holly Valance, that's her name. Well, she goes by
Yeah.
Candy. She's married, but she made an obvious comment, and I thought to myself, it's so bloody obvious. She says, "Yeah, look, you start off as a young person on the left, right? But as you get older and as you start accruing more money, you get into business, put a few assets aside, etc., you realize how crap the left is, and you move to the right." It's a generalization, but you know what? I think it's right more often than not. Okay, and that's what I describe myself as. At uni, yeah, let's get tax more here, tax more there. Why should they have more than this? There's a lot of politics of envy, if you're familiar with that term.
Yeah.
In other words, the envious people, why should you have more than me? And I'm going to tax you to bring you down to my level, or get you to hand out what you've made. And Margaret Thatcher made a very good comment many years ago too. Do you remember who she was? She was the Prime Minister of the UK.
Yeah.
Her comment, which summed up socialism pretty well for me, was the biggest problem with socialism is that. Hang on, how does it go? The biggest problem with socialism is that you run out of other people's money. That's what it was. Yeah, you run out of other people's money. So, in other words, they're going after someone else's ready-made fortune or whatever, and they want a slice of that. They're not willing to work for it themselves, all right, or accrue it themselves. And that's the biggest take I got from that, all right? So, not that I'm a big fan of Margaret Thatcher either, but, I take snippets here and there, mate, from quotes. And I think another one you had, one of your YouTube clips was on the media, how trustworthy it was, or something along those lines. Yep. Is that right?
Yeah, the mainstream media.
Do you trust the mainstream media? Yep. And I thought back to a comment that Denzel Washington made. I don't know if you remember that. He said basically, you read the paper, you are misinformed, right? If you don't read the paper, you're uninformed.
Mm.
And then the commentator or the reporter says, "So what's the answer?" He goes, "That's a bloody good question." So what is the answer? Do you rely on social media as your form of or source of news? Or do you look at other forms as well? These days, I try to probably look across the whole board. I mean, I use the YouTube stuff as well. I love that. I love looking at print. I know that sounds funny, doesn't it, for someone at your age, mate? You're probably thinking print. Yeah, I'm not much into the digital stuff apart from the the screen that I'm looking at every now and then. But look, you try to grab snippets here and there, and then come up with some sort of an educated conclusion, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've found that myself as well. And when I hear someone tell me something that I meet, I always have a little bit of skepticism, whether it's a left or right-leaning view, and then try to sort of dig into it a bit myself. I think everyone can benefit from that approach where don't necessarily believe everything you hear, especially in today's day and age with a guy like Trump, right? Where 90% of people that you meet either absolutely love him or absolutely hate him, and there's few people that can go, you know what, he's probably not done this too well, but he's done this well, and he hasn't done that well, but he's done that well. And I think that sort of nuanced take is probably more important than ever in today's world.
100%, mate. Yeah, look, I agree with you there. You just got to, like I said, there's a lot of stuff out there, and even the mainstream media, as you said in your YouTube clip, you were basically alluding to the fact that there's agendas in the background with any media source, right? They've got their own agendas, right? They're pushing certain things, they're editing certain things. Things are taken out of context to suit their own agenda, and like I said, you've just got to make up your own mind based on what limited sources you do have in front of you. It's very good,
absolutely.
Mate. Yeah, so
it's been a blast talking to you, Chris. And what I'd love to do is I'm trying to line up. Obviously this is the first time I've done this, but I'm trying to line up a few different people, and I want to host some debates. So if you'd like, I'd love to. I know a guy who's right into Australian politics, but got some left-wing opinions. So if you'd like, I'd love to set up a little debate.
Okay. Can't we do it meet in person? How tall is this guy?
I'm not actually sure. So he just got recommended to me by a friend. He said this guy loves politics and he's left-leaning. So he'll jump on live stream. So
of course he will. Let me finish off, mate, by saying something. Do you remember who Lionel Rose was?
No.
Lionel Rose was a boxer, an Indigenous boxer. Okay,
right.
Represented this country back in the 50s and 60s, I think it was.
Okay.
I remember him growing up myself, sort of watching him anyway, and he made a very, very pertinent comment about when he steps into the ring, he doesn't buy into this black and white stuff. He reckons he steps into the ring representing all Australians. It's a pity that that's not what's happening right now.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think that's the message from Martin Luther King as well, right? That his key message was judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And I think he would be really ashamed of how a lot of this stuff is going today. You know, all this stuff of help people with a particular skin color, and it's done with, I guess pure incentives at heart, but it doesn't achieve nearly the result that Martin Luther King and guys like you were saying, Lionel Rose, were actually aiming for in the beginning.
I think the ultimate prime minister then, mate, if we take in this DEI, and I'm going to make a joke of it, and please don't hammer me for this, but I think we need someone in a wheelchair who's black and gay. I think that covers all bases. Yeah, maybe Indigenous as well. Sorry. Yeah.
They all add to your points, don't they?
Well, I'm just trying to paint the picture that's the sort of person, if you're selecting to represent a corporate or a company or whatever. Like I said, mate, it's not the answer. We're not. I think there's another guy that I follow on YouTube. I'm not sure if you've come across this guy. This guy's a clinical psychologist. He's a Canadian. He goes by the name of Jordan Peterson. Have you ever come across
Peterson? I'm very familiar with him. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And you've heard about the stuff he talks about. He talks about the gender identity stuff. He talks about the gender pay gap. Okay.
Yes.
Myth. He just basically pulls it apart, and all this white privileged business. He just guns at it. The feminist movements. He has a crack at everyone. And you know what? There's not a lot. I haven't seen anyone really to hammer him back. So he comes at people with logic and facts and data, okay, because he's a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. They've done all the literature's all there. So he backs it up with everything, that he says. And it's a pity that this guy has been just lurking in the background, you know what I mean? And he shouldn't be out there, doing a lot more. But, he's a lecturer or something at universities and things. He stands up for men, young men in particular, who are feeling like they're carrying their testicles around for nothing. I don't know, in today's age. But anyway, you get my point, though. But
that's right. Yeah.
That's one guy. And another guy that I sort of look at every now and then who says a lot conservatively is Ben Shapiro. I don't know if you've come across him. He's another guy I like listening to every now and then. Not everything, but some of the things I think he says are good. But, yeah, they're all conservatives by and large. And but anyway, mate, I'm glad I've had the opportunity to vent.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and you're a great guy, and I would love to get you back on the show at the same time as someone else and have a little bit of debate about Australia and the future that we should be taking.
Oh, absolutely, mate. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity. I felt quite nervous, and that's probably why I fluffed some of my words, mate, initially, but I probably had 1,000,001 things running through my head that I wanted to share with you, and but you do it a lot more often than I do, mate. Get in front of a camera, so.
Yeah, mate, nothing to be nervous about. I mean, I don't think there's been too many people watching anyway, but I'll probably post some clips from this if it comes out all right, and then I'd love to polish this up, get it a little bit more professional, and then get you back on the show.
But mate, hats off to you. Well done. And like I said, you took a big gamble thinking, who's this Chris guy that I'm going to reach out to, and could he be some sort of a loser or whatever? But I'm glad you took the gamble, mate, and you got to meet me and I got to meet you. And I was happy to come and find you somewhere, mate, in some bloody park. I don't know, in Fitzroy or something, which I've noticed you've done a few times. And
I like actually, while you're here, you might be able to give me some suggestions. But obviously, so when I film my videos, I like going to open areas where there's a lot of foot traffic, right? So parks work really well. But I try to get a pretty balanced take where, half of the video I'll film in a more left-wing location. But and so that's why usually I go to Fitzroy, because that's a great place to get really left-wing opinions. But I don't actually have the equivalent for a right-wing place yet in Melbourne, because, I mean, obviously Melbourne as a whole is quite progressive. But
I can tell you right now, some of the more conservative places will be some of the blue ribbon places. If you go down to Brighton, you go through some of those places like Camberwell, you look through it's Baldwin. People with that have got money. So find the places that have got money, and you'll probably more often than not find people who are right leaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I've got a ton of topics. So I just want to give you some ideas. So I sat down and jot down these ideas for you. Maybe stuff that you might want to work with.
Yeah.
The whole woke corporate virtue signaling stuff you already covered. And the other examples I was going to use there was Budweiser. I don't know if you know what happened to Budweiser over in the US.
No. What happened with them?
Well, they fell apart, mate, pretty much immediately after they basically advertised their product with a transgender person.
Right. So yes, and their consumer base is
so they
more...
basically they buried themselves within us right after the ad.
Yeah.
Jag was another one. Going down this path of woke and showing us people that multicolored and everything else. So you might, but anyway, that's all to do with the woke stuff. But the Indigenous stuff, talking about the referendum, the one flag. I mean, Dutton, I think he's on a winner here when he says, "I step out in front of one flag, not three." So automatically, he's saying he's showing the unity, right, which people need to see. I mean, and he made it very clear, I think, when he said that I don't know of any other Western country prime ministers or president that step out in front of multiple flags. Okay.
Yeah.
His whole issue, the image is there, mate. One flag, and that's it. That's the one we stand in front of. So you can see that he's already signalling that I'm not going to put up with this crap. He sounds very, very similar to Trump in that sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that you might want to look at was there was recently the ALP tried to push a misinformation bill. Are you aware of that?
No, not a misinformation one. I saw obviously the social media stuff. I'm just writing some of these ideas down now.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about that. That's always dangerous territory.
Basically, the government was trying to determine what was going to be printed. Okay, what was going to go out there. They were going to basically edit and filter what was being portrayed on social media platforms. So how do you like that?
You certainly can't have that. You certainly can't have that.
Where's democracy, mate? If you're going to, I mean, we're not living in China, are we, or North Korea? So you can see where they were going with that. But fortunately, that was defeated.
Right. Yes. When was that? Was that all in the last few weeks? Or?
It was last year, mate. It was in the last few months of last year. So
right.
I can't give you an exact time, but I'm pretty sure if you look it up, you'll find it. A couple of other things you might be interested in. I spoke to you about the net zero, the EVs, the mandates, and the subsidies that the governments are pumping into people buying an electric car. I don't know if you're familiar, which is leading off from that, is the topic on Chris Bowen, who's the energy minister, federal energy minister. He's brought out efficiency standards legislation. Are you aware of those?
No.
Get a load of this. This guy's basically saying that basically their measure is CO2 being pumped out per kilogram or per ton or whatever it is of the car, right? So they're looking at emissions. If the car is pumping out or deemed to be a polluter, what they're going to do is they're going to tax the crap out of it. Okay? So your Toyota Hiluxes, your Rangers, your Navaras, your Range Rovers or whatever, supposedly these big petrol guzzlers, they're going to be taxing the actual crap out of it to the point where you're going to be paying a ton of money, mate, on top of the normal price because the companies are going to pass that on to the consumers. So they're trying to dictate what they want you to buy at the dealership. All right. So this is what I'm saying to you. This is how pathetic this government is. Right.
Is that what that America had a similar thing? I'm not sure of the details,
UK,
but Trump just ended it.
Yeah. That was part of what's his name? What was the Biden's administration was doing?
Yeah. I'm not sure of the details of that, but I know that Trump's just ended some sort of electric vehicle mandate.
Correct, because they were pumping a lot of money into it, mate, subsidies to make people buy this particular. It's more of an ideology than a bloody alternative form of energy, mate. Running around, seriously, that's just my opinion, of course, right? But anyway, So anyway, the impact on consumers. So he was going to basically. So you walked into if you're a tradie and you wanted to buy a Hilux for work, and you find now the Hilux is costing you another $18,000 on top because it doesn't meet their energy standards, and they were going to change those standards every so often, whatever that meant, right? This is where we're going, right? They don't want you driving fuel, basically internal combustion engines.
Yeah.
So that's something you might want to consider. I obviously had the energy one down, so the key difference between the two parties, renewables versus nuclear. That might be something you want to run with your viewers. What about the state ALP here, the Victorian government wanting to phase out gas? That's a huge. What that's going to mean to people who have got appliances that are gas. You know what I mean? How many going to cost you $10,000 to change all sorts of things in the house?
Yeah. People are struggling already. Yeah.
Heating. Yeah, you name it, right? The other topic you want to bring up is the CBD. What's happening to the CBD with protesters, the e-scooters, the bike lanes? They're all nestled into what's going on in the city.
Yeah.
The big one I think you've already talked about. I'm not sure actually. Is it youth crime and bail laws? You might want to talk about that sort of stuff.
No, I haven't talked about that. Youth crime.
That's a hot topic.
So what specifically? Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, look, basically, as you know, that the ALP, the state government here, watered down those bail laws, okay, and made it easier. In fact, you'll laugh when I tell you that the magistrates were sent to basically do some PD, professional development, on how to tackle and as a last resort, incarcerate these kids, right? So really, how many times do you have to commit an offence before, you become a menace and need to be locked up, and taught a lesson? So these kids are going out there, mate, with machetes and everything else, meat cleavers. I don't know. But so that's another one. Talk about youth crime, how it's skyrocketed and the very little that's been done. All right. The politics stuff, which we talked about, the debt, housing crisis, land tax, compliance laws, all that sort of stuff. Here's another one that you might be interested in. Strata corporations and how their conflict of interests affect with the developer. So you know how you've got a lot of high-rise units and apartments, right, being built?
Yep.
There's strata in place. In other words, it's a company that oversees anything that needs to be fixed, or et cetera, and you've got body corporate fees and all that sort of stuff. Well, if you delve into it, Four Corners did a report on that, which looked at how corrupt it is, and the developer's basically in the pockets of the insurer. So the insurer's basically they're saying, oh yeah, we'll look after you at the next building or a project we take on, right? So have a look at Four Corners. That's a great ABC report on that.
Okay.
So look at strata corporations, right? And the other one is the SRL, Airport Rail Link, East-West Link, which I think I briefly touched on. Another one that you haven't talked about, which is a big one happening and will be happening, I believe, in Australia very soon, is scams and banks, what they're going to do. I don't know if you're familiar with the UK. What they've got is the onus or responsibilities on the bank. So you get scammed, the bank will cover your money, no questions asked, pretty much. All right. Here, you've got to go and prove that the bank was at fault. So the onus is on me, right, to chase my money and prove that I didn't make a mistake or didn't do anything wrong. So in other words, by focusing on the banks over there in the UK, they're putting the pressure on them to basically clamp down on the types of scams that are going and happening, right, under their noses. Sometimes the banks turn a blind eye to this sort of stuff. They don't want to know about it, all right? So that's what the UK's done. They've passed laws now that make the bank, responsible. So, again, that's a huge topic, and I think it's going to follow suit down here in Australia because we're talking about billions of dollars that go missing, mate, every year from hardworking Australians. Another favourite of mine, mate, which I'd love to be brought in on this one. This is something I did as a health and PE teacher for 35 years, on and off, and that is road safety, cars and road safety. I used to collect articles and data and everything else on cameras and mobile phones and the distractions they are and they cause, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be a great topic if you wanted to talk about road safety cameras. What are they really helping? Are they doing anything? If you look at the latest data,
which sort of view are you of? Are you of that we're doing too much or not enough?
I'm of the view that a lot of those are basically measures just to collect money, the revenue raising. If they really want to stop people looking at their mobile phone, for God's sake, we put people on the moon. How hard is it to put a disabling chip inside the car? So as soon as you crank that motor over, guess what? Your mobile device can't work. All right. I grew up without a mobile phone, mate, driving cars for a couple of decades without this. Why is it we can't do that now? But we expect, get a load of this. This is the hypocrisy about it. We know it's a distraction, But what do? We ask Mr. Apple to put in Apple CarPlay or Samsung's equivalent and magnify the phone screen onto a bigger screen. Bigger distraction. Shit. You got more menus in a car these days than a restaurant, mate. Do we really need that shit? How about focusing on driving, looking at the windscreen rather than the phone screen? Something simple like that. Mate, I'm pretty passionate about shit like that, big time, because I taught it for 30 plus years. And one final topic, mate, that is a real winner, I think, for you, is you can talk about AI, the pros and cons of artificial intelligence, mate.
So I actually did. That was my second video on artificial intelligence, and do you think it'll end up saving or destroying us?
Actually, now I do remember, mate. Yeah, okay.
That was a very early one. And I didn't have as much experience in what I was actually doing then. So, but that was a bit of fun, that video. But that is a topic that I think about a lot, and I'm quite worried about that.
Yeah, mate. I would be looking at that one for sure. Seriously. Yeah. Maybe do a bit of homework and then just take it out to the public and see what they think or what they know. Because there's pros and cons with everything. But unfortunately, AI, it's like the mobile phone, mate. We talk about it was inherently brought out for good purpose. But these days we've got people with myopathy, short eyeballs, mate. They can't see past their bloody phone. They've got posture issues. They've got the massive distraction while they're driving. I mean, you can see the chain effects, mate, of all this sort of stuff, what it means.
Yeah.
The addiction, I leave the home now going phone, keys, wallet, phone, keys, wallet, the Holy Trinity before I walk out the door. I never used to do that, mate. But I did just some suggestions, mate, that I jotted down that you might want to look at.
No, that's great. I just jotted them all down, and that's awesome. Thanks very much. Yeah, I've got a video coming out very soon about COVID as well, which is another controversial topic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I noticed a good one as well. You asked a couple of guys what looked like down the foreshore. I think there were two guys on the bench or something. I can't remember.
Last night's video.
How you thought they handled them? Again, I mean, did we not remember the tracking that the state government tried to do when it was ridiculous? They couldn't keep. It ran out of control trying to track who where and who met with who and then the other ridiculous thing was that their handling of the Swanston on the ridges on Swanston Street, the hotels. Do you remember that? They had literally Uber Eats drivers handling security. What a joke, Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about there, and the sad side of things.
Personally, do you think that the government overreached when they mandated I guess it wasn't technically a mandate, but they enforced the vaccines for if you wanted to work? Like they did. I
was part of that. Yeah, I had to take a vaccine if I was to step into the classroom again, mate. So I had very little choice unless I wanted to be unemployed. So
and do you think they were right to do that or not?
Look, that's a tough one. I don't have as much a problem about the vaccines as I do with the curfews and all that other stuff. It was really sad to see people who had elderly, in particular, in elderly citizens' homes, aged care facilities that were passing away and they couldn't even go to the funeral. That was devastating. That was devastating. To me, that's the worst of the worst, I think. The vaccine was still debatable, which reminds me of something that a lot of people don't know about the vaccine, and that was our man Novak Djokovic. Novaks.
Yes.
I don't know if you know much about him, what he tried to do.
I'm a big tennis fan. I know a lot about Novak, yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something. How did he try to get in this country? Based on what? Do you remember?
He did lie, didn't he? In the beginning, or
he didn't lie. Now let me ask you this. We all know he doesn't believe in. He's an anti-vaxxer, right?
Yeah. Well. I don't know if he's a strict anti-vaxxer or if it was just the COVID vaccine, right?
Okay, but at the end of the day, he's never gone and got it, has he?
No, that's right. He never had the COVID vaccine.
He was against the COVID vaccine, anti. Okay. Now, here's a bit of background for you, and this is a classic, mate. You'll love this, all right? 98 of the top 100 men's players that came out or were part of the tennis tournament back then, the Australian Open, were vaccinated. Only 2 were not vaccinated. Mr. Novaks, okay, and the second guy was an American guy called Tennis Sandgren.
Yep.
But he didn't bother getting on a plane. Okay. Now, how do you think Mr. Nadal and anyone else that was sitting in the hotels going, oh, this guy's gotten in, he hasn't vaccinated, but we had to get the jab to play? It wouldn't have gone down very well for his fellow competitors, correct?
No, that's right.
But now this is the bombshell. And do you know that this guy's coming up in the news just recently because he's the coach of Sinner. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, Darren Cahill.
Beautiful. Yep. Darren Cahill was on Channel 9, I think it was at the time. Well, I can't remember who was doing the coverage. He said, and I'm surprised they didn't edit this out, right? He turns around and goes, Mr. Djokovic has come through at what do you call it, immigration thing at the airport, claiming the reason why he hadn't been vaccinated was because he had contracted it less than how many weeks before in Spain.
That's right. Yes. Now you're jogging my memory. Yeah.
Okay. So now we've got a guy here trying to come in saying the reason why he hasn't been vaccinated is because he had it. He contracted it back in Spain, and therefore there had to be a certain period of time that had to pass or elapse before he could get the jab. And that period of time hadn't elapsed, right? That was his excuse to get in. Now, how deceiving is that, knowing full well that he's never ever got one, even since. Yeah. So my point is, how scrupulous was this guy trying to get in, sneak in that way and say, oh, I haven't got vaccinated because I copped it in Spain. We all know that you were never going to get it, Mr. Novak. And Darren,
that's true. I don't think he ever was going to get it. But I remember at the time people were debating whether he had actually contracted COVID when he said that he did.
Yeah, that was also a debate. But the point was that's what he was spinning. And he was in cahoots with the Victorian Health Department, which is not a Victorian Health Department issue. This is jurisdiction of the federal. Okay, immigration's under the jurisdiction of the federal government.
Yeah.
But yet the Victorian Health Department, whatever it's called, and Mr. Tiley, what's his name? Craig Tiley.
Craig Tiley, yeah.
We're all going, we've got to get this guy in here because he puts bums on seats, etc., etc. They were just looking at it from a bloody money spinning venture. And that's a disappointing thing. They thought that the Victorian government could weigh into the argument and get him in, and they couldn't. Obviously, it was a federal matter. But like I said, my business with all of this is I couldn't believe he was trying to say that, that's the only reason why he couldn't get vaccinated. And we all know that, no, he had plenty of opportunities beforehand to get vaccinated, okay, Connor? And the reason why he didn't is because he's an anti-COVID vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer full stop. He claims and he's so fussy about what he puts in his body, correct? He's always talked about that.
That's right, yeah. So I think he used to suffer from a lot of allergies in his early playing days, and then he ended up going completely vegan, and I think he's still vegan, got a plant-based diet, and is very particular about what he puts in his body, and that's why that's his reasoning for why he didn't want to get the COVID vaccine, I believe. I'm not sure of his stance on other vaccines.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but like I said to you, that was the smoke screen that he was trying to use to get in. But like I said to you, put yourself, if you're one of those other players already here in a hotel room going, I've had to get this thing, shot in my arm to play, and this guy comes through the back door and goes, no problem.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have gone down too well, even though the players didn't want to say it, but I could almost read their faces when they were being interviewed while this was happening.
That's right. And I wonder, if the other players saw that they were forced to get it as well.
Correct.
Like that, I mean, they wouldn't have cared if it was something that they didn't care about in the first place, right?
Yeah, true. So, spot on, mate. But so you're a tennis man as well. You follow it, yeah?
I love the tennis. Yes, I love the tennis. Absolutely.
I do too. The only thing I don't like about the tennis is the crowds these days. I think I'm more conservative. I'm going to the tennis. I'm not going to an AFL game. It's constantly idiots. Your lighting going out, is it?
No. That's just. I was just checking if there was anyone in the chat room.
All right. Do you need to chat? Do you need to jump off or what?
No. I'm good. No.
Yeah. All right, mate. I'm just cautious that you might need to get off.
No. I'm all yours. But So I've heard that argument a lot at the tennis that the Australian Open crowds are far too rowdy for tennis standards. I'm not sure if you've ever been to any of the other Grand Slams.
I haven't been to any of the other Grand Slams. I've been to the Australian Open, and I went pre-COVID. And what I will tell you is I noticed there was people carrying on, and I thought, okay, but then they've opened up this bar or tent or something recently, and people getting smashed or sloshed with drinks, and then how do they expect to control their behaviour? I'm thinking, really, okay, the happy slam or whatever, literally, people are just.
That's right, because I had the privilege of I go to the Australian Open every year, but I had the privilege of going to Wimbledon last year, and it was completely different to the Australian Open. It was that's right. Yeah, so the demographic was probably the average average fan was between 50 and 60, and suits, hats, very, very particular sort of clapping and no carrying on about. And the Australian Open, I would say the average demographic definitely of a night time is between 20 to 30 young people that are really enjoying drinks. And I mean, proponents for that argue that it is bringing in a lot of fans to tennis and a lot of new fans. Which is true. It does pay their bills, but I can also see, I can see the argument from both sides as well, because tennis has always traditionally been a sport where you were polite, right? Gentleman's sport.
Exactly. A bit like golf, I suppose. There's silence before the guy, tees off or something, so. But look, it's changed, but I think the mindset's changed, mate. I think the younger people like yourself, I've heard comments and I've read them in the paper and all that, and they've claimed that I'm entitled to see some sort of entertainment. If that's entertainment of watching players also, G'ing up the crowd and carrying on, I don't know, mate. I'm a bit lost on that, because you saw some of the booing that happens with players as well. Now that's something.
Yeah, that's not on. That's absolutely
not on. Exactly. Yeah, and yet this is again one of the offshoots of people going in there who are half drunk and and everything else, mate. No one seems to be. They've got no filter.
Yeah, that's right. So I assume you wouldn't be a big fan of Mr. Kyrgios.
Not at all, mate. He's as far as I'm concerned. Look, I've got a few opinions about him, but he's covered in tats. He started off not being covered in tats, and tattoos is another issue again. I look at it as graffiti for the body, but anyway, but that's each to their own. But Kyrgios looks like he's worked on a car and hasn't wiped it off.
Yeah.
His whole arm looks like one big smudge. And, I'm not quite sure where the attractiveness steps in there, mate. I don't understand what the attraction is with some of this stuff. I say these days, mate, I hope you haven't got a heap of tattoos either, mate.
No, I've got zero tattoos, and I've got no plans of getting any.
Mate, without you cutting me off, I feel like today almost, mate, and I'll make a general statement that a number of 20s and 30s, even 40-somethings these days, I'm noticing more and more people with more tattoos than brain cells. There you go, mate. Okay,
my dad would have a similar opinion.
Yes, and that's the caliber of person I'm seeing out there, my friend. But then again, I'm in my 60s, so the only people that used to get tattoos were people who were in the defence force or something, or someone who'd done time. That sort of thing, or belonged to a gang, and my trivial question is, which population, mate, has the highest density of tattoos?
Oh, geez, I wouldn't even want to guess.
What? Okay, so it's a trivia question, right? So, which population has the highest density of tattoos?
Are you talking ethnicity in Australia, or are you talking country?
Any population you can think of.
I would say.
You won't be surprised with the answer.
Is it
populations, mate?
It's definitely men.
It's a prison population, mate.
Prison. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
The trivia is, you'll find more tattoos per capita in a prison than anywhere else.
Yeah.
What's that tell you about the demographics, mate?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And here's another one that I've encountered, because
we got a guy in the chat room that said, "G'day, fellas, no tattoos here."
Listen, I'm thinking of getting one though, mate. Are you ready?
Are you? No, I don't believe that.
I was thinking of a skull. I was thinking of barbed wire. But look, given my age, I'm thinking of getting my home address.
Let me ask you this, because this is something that I wonder about a little bit of the time. So obviously, you're not allowed to get a tattoo before the age of 18, right?
Yeah. So what makes
do you think that this guy in the chat room, he spoke to me in the park about Australia Day, had no shirt on. Good to see you, mate. I remember you for sure. Anyway, so do you think that since you're not allowed to get a tattoo under the age of 18, that you should be able to change your gender under the age of 18?
Under the age of 8. Okay. And this is something I saw in my profession as a teacher. Okay. I saw people, I had to teach it. As a health teacher, I had to teach gender identity, mate. Okay.
Yeah.
This is stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So you've hit a raw nerve here. My take on the whole thing, mate, was look, ask yourself the question: what age do you start then to talk to kids about that sort of thing? And are they mature enough to understand what you've been talking about?
Well, yeah. That's the critical question, isn't it?
Yeah. So my point is, but you know what? It seems to be okay in society to have drag queens read story time down at one of the councils. Where do people get off thinking that that's perfectly fine? You know, it's just gone beyond the joke, mate, this sort of stuff. But anyway, going back to the gender identity stuff, I had parents at parent-teacher night asking me, where do you stand on this? And I took a back seat. I said, look, I don't stand anywhere on this. I'm not passing any judgment. All I'm telling you and tell your son or daughter is this is the curriculum. I explain it as best as I can, but I do not comment. I do not give a narrative or an opinion about it. Kids are able to make their own, only because I've got to teach it. It's part of the curriculum. But I don't want to dwell on things too long. I've had questions asked by kids, and again, I dismiss it. I fob it off. I don't want to go into too much detail about how I feel about it because that's not the point. The point is this is what the education department wants us to shovel down, right?
So what was the curriculum?
Respectful relationships was what it was termed, okay? And under that, you had gender identity, okay? And gender was seen as different to sex, all right? So they're two different things. They were constructs. One was obviously biological, what you're born with, and the other one was what you saw yourself identifying as in society, how you felt.
And they were mandating that you taught this in school?
Absolutely, mate. Respectful relationships is the topic. Did you go to a private school by any chance or a government school?
I did go to a private school, yes.
I was gonna guess you probably did, yeah.
So, okay, well, so how does the curriculum work in private schools compared to public schools then?
I think, I think my understanding of private schools, and I've never taught in a private school, but private schools have a lot more say as to what they can teach with things like that. You look at Catholic schools that are based, religious-based type schools, they wouldn't even go anywhere near that stuff. Okay? Yes, that's why some parents will send their kids deliberately to an independent Catholic school, right, to avoid a lot of this crap that's being passed down by the government. So you were mandated to teach kids that sex and gender were different and correct. They could identify as however they wanted to identify. And that was is that a state government mandate or federal? State government, mate, in charge of education. All right. We're the education state, mate. Have you seen it on the number plates? Yeah, that's right. So how did you feel about that as a teacher? Did you disagree with that? Yeah, absolutely. It didn't sit well with me. I've got a traditional Christian value. I've been raised that way, and it didn't sit well with me at all. But like I said to you, I was doing a job, and the job was to do exactly what the education department were instructing me to do. And I was teaching primarily at a Greek school. Okay, a lot of Greek, so you can understand Greek Orthodox Christian. Yeah. And like I said, the parent-teacher night, I'd sit there after the kids gone home and obviously told them what we're doing. I'd have parent-teacher night where parents are queuing up to have ask me the question, the $64,000 question. Are you teaching this? And what are you saying? And I said, look, I'm just listing it, going through it, but I'm not passing judgment. And that's how you got to attack this sort of stuff. I'm not there to tell you how I feel. That's not the point. I'm there to instruct you on what's going on, what's happening, what people are seeing and saying, and etc. But I'm not there to tell you what I think of it. And what age were these kids? This was mainly happening at year 8. So we're talking about 13-year-olds. Yeah. Year 8. Yeah. That was a lot earlier than I was expecting you to say. Were you going to say year 9, year 10, were you? Well, yeah, I thought you were going to say a bit older than that. Year 8, you start getting into that sort of stuff. And then you start hitting contraception and all that other stuff in year 9, STIs or STIs as they're called today. And in your experience, how were the kids responding to these sorts of topics? Look, there were kids that were just saying nothing. Okay, by and large, most kids were just clamming up, not saying anything. And I got the occasional question. That's about it. So I never felt uncomfortable, but when I did get a question, I was very much thinking it through as to choosing my words carefully, mate, as to what am I going to say. And that was always in the back of my mind. How do I say it without, falling into hot water?
Yeah, we've got this guy, same guy in the chat room said it's not a good thing to be teaching. And look, the argument I hear from, look, I obviously do my best to stay unbiased, but the argument I hear from the right is that, look, most people on the right that I've talked to say, look, adults can do their own thing, but it's another thing when you push stuff onto children.
Correct. Yeah. Have you seen some of the books that have come through the libraries these days targeting young kids?
I've maybe heard a story or two in the news, but tell me about it.
Well, it's more rife in the US, where you've got literally on YouTube, if you Google it, you'll come across a number of parents that have gone up before the board, of a school and said, what is this horse shit that you're putting out on the actual bookshelves? And you can identify this, and they use all these names and as a narrative. But essentially, Sammy can be, anything she wants to be or he wants to be. Was a he, is now a she. Anyway, so parents are just cracking up about it and saying this is not right, and having a go at the board, and some people getting fired up. And anyway, but look, again, the question is, should this stuff be, taught in the first place or brought out in the first place? Some people feel, like me, I don't think it belongs there. But again, my background, and I'm not making excuses here, but my background is one of a Christian background, raised to believe that we're only two genders, right? Two sexes. Okay. And if you fell, outside of that, it was because there was probably something wrong with you, or you're a hermaphrodite, you were born with both genetic genitalia. There had to be some sort of extraordinary reason, right? An exception to the rule. But it was pretty much deemed as an abnormality, all right? Not normal.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up being taught and believing.
So Berza K3172 in the chat said, but if the curriculum is to read those books, you have to read them, right?
Well, I never came across a particular book like that, but that's what I've heard and seen people talk about. I never physically went. I used the textbook that we used it would mention that sort of stuff, but very briefly. There was no storybook, okay, which is what some of these people were complaining about. There was an actual storybook going through characters, names, etc. So, but like I said, I did teach the curriculum as best as I could, and I was the sort of guy that tiptoed around it, and for obvious reasons, like I said, if I didn't choose my words carefully, I could probably have a number of complaints coming through the switchboard, the following day. Principal would probably come and see me, etc.
Yeah, that is a scary thing in the education system nowadays, because that's how it sort of encroaches upon you, right? Where, everyone just doesn't want to lose their job, which means you don't stand up for the positions that you actually believe in, and these things slowly creep further and further.
And that's the dilemma, mate. Do you stand by your values, or do you turn a blind eye to it and say, well, look, no, I need the next paycheck because that's going to sort out the bills on my fridge, that sort of thing. So
is that something that you struggled with a lot?
Not struggled with, but like I said, this started to become an issue more so in my later years of teaching. But certainly not before that. There was never really that much of an issue about it. But like I said, it's become stronger and stronger because, like I said, if you want to talk about politics, we've had in office 10 years in Victoria a leftist government who's pushing this sort of stuff more so. You're not going to get that, or less likely to get that, from the other mob in the blue corner.
Do you know if they're pushing that same curriculum in other states?
No, I don't know. I don't know about interstate curriculums. No.
And if you were in charge, when do you think it would be appropriate to start sex education, and would you be teaching them about that sort of stuff?
Look, they do it at primary school. It's very, fairly on. I think they do it in grade 5, grade 6. They start to look at that sort of area, and then it gets obviously a little bit more detailed in year 7, year 8. But look, at the end of the day, you get to year 9, it's probably the last of the sex ed sort of stuff, and then year 10 they have electives and so forth. But year 9, you start to getting into more issues like STIs, as I mentioned before, contraception. You start looking at topics like abortion, etc. So it gets a little bit more ethical Okay, you start bringing that sort of stuff, values, ethics into it. But that's where it starts becoming more of a hot topic, if you like, as you get through it.
Do you have an opinion on the abortion issue?
That's a tough one, mate. I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that, but
look, well, you can face it.
Generally speaking, I'm a pro-lifer, I would say. I would, but there's been, and this is where the exceptions are, you know, some woman gets raped or something, and it's a kid that they don't want. Then I could almost say, abort. There would be circumstances where I would say yes, it's valid in my mind, in my opinion. But more often than not, it's a life. And some people say, you know, life doesn't begin till after it's out of the womb, you know, or whatever. I disagree. I think very early on in the piece, mate, I remember seeing a biology teacher show us something on a PowerPoint, and it was just really disturbing. It was an abortion, okay, and the camera was zooming in on this particular little fetus. And when they stuck in the instrument to cut it up and suck it out, okay, I'm going to be pretty descriptive here, you could see that the thing was in massive distress. Okay, now the religious point of view is that life starts with the union of the X, you know, and Y, both the sperm and the egg. Other people will tell you, no, it's like I said, it's not alive till it's after. No, mate, I'm telling you right now, when you look at videos and scans and everything else, this thing is alive. It's moving. You know, so that's just my point of view. Again, I'm not here to preach my values and things like that, but like I said, I think there are, going back to your original question about abortion, yeah, there would be extenuating circumstances where I could probably justify it. Yeah,
it's one of those issues where, like, I really can see a valid argument from both sides.
Yeah,
it's such a tough issue.
Look, the women will tell you, oh, it's my body, you're not going to tell me what to do with it. There's that argument as well. And the guy says, well, hang on a minute. But I remember, and this is a little bit off track, there was a case where, and I remember reading this in part of the legal study stuff, there was a case where there was a woman who was undergoing chemotherapy. Okay, she had cancer, and she had her eggs taken out, frozen, right? But they'd been fertilized with a partner's sperm. Okay, this set incredible precedent, because I'm going to ask you the question: when she got over her chemotherapy, okay, but her partner had since left the scene, right? Is she now entitled to get those fertilized eggs implanted in her, because this is her only chance at having a kid?
So she had eggs taken out before she had chemotherapy. Her partner left her in the.
Yeah, but they were fertilized eggs, so it's an little embryo.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So it's got his sperm. So these are ready to be implanted back into the womb. Yeah.
So the issue is obviously the ramifications of how tied up the father is into child support after the baby's born, right?
Okay.
That's where I see the debate for whether that should be allowed or not, right? Because here's where I see a lot of people argue about the abortion side of things. Like, I've heard some people say, yes, absolutely, women can choose what they want to do with their own body, but the men, if they don't want the body, if they don't want the baby, they and you're letting abortion be legal, well, then why don't men get the say in whether they want to support the child or not? If they get no say in the abortion.
Yeah, look, it depends on which way you want to look at it. But let me tell you the outcome of that court case. She lost.
Right.
The eggs were destroyed. Okay, because he said, I don't want these coming into my life. I don't want to be part of it anymore. So she lost. Okay, that was the so you can understand the precedent out of something like that. But look, it's a very emotional topic. It's a very distressing topic for some people. Again, I'm not the best man to talk to about any of this. Again, I'm just passing.
So I've never actually come across that idea before of if the eggs are fertilized but they're frozen. I've never thought about that.
Yep. So they're ready to be implanted, so to say, back in an incubator to grow. Okay?
So, in your opinion, would you consider that a life?
Yeah, that's a good question, because they're frozen. So, but if they can be all of a sudden brought back to life, because that's what people do, they freeze their eggs, etc., etc. So they're still, I suppose, potentially alive, aren't they? If you look at it that way, they're not dead, right? They're just maybe what's the word for it? Incapacitated for the time being.
Yeah, in hibernation.
Yeah, hibernation is probably the word. Yeah, but
yeah,
look, it's a tough topic. I don't know, mate. There's ethical reasons around this sort of stuff, and depending on which side of the fence you're coming from. I'll give you another example. I mean, let's not even talk about that. Let's say there's the divorce and separation is a hot topic as well. You know, with again, something that I'm really jacked off about is, and I've seen a couple of mates of mine go through this, where they get very little say in the kids' upbringing. They get the visit. One guy had his wife move interstate, and he would only get to see him a couple of times a year during school holidays when he got a chance to go up and have a look at him. The money he was giving. Now, here's my flip side about any of this, the maintenance or the alimony or whatever you want to call it, child support. Why isn't the woman accountable and responsible to show where that money is exactly going to the kid for books, clothing, food?
Yeah.
Why doesn't she have to be accountable for the money given? She could be spending it in Bali or a hair salon. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic for me.
That's right.
Just make sure you make that contribution into her account, but she doesn't have to account for where the money's gone. You know. I know this is off the topic, but I've seen situations where, again, I've contributed money. My mate says to, feeding and clothing, and then she's just gallivanting overseas in Bali or Phuket every time, or whatever, Why aren't they accountable?
Yeah, that's right. I've heard similar arguments with when you're giving support to homeless people as well in those subsidies, and should we be tracking where that money's going? Are they just spending it on drugs, or what are they doing with it?
I'll tell you what the answer is. I a couple of years ago, I felt pretty bad about some guy that I saw as an elderly guy begging on the corner, and I was just in the CBD, mate. I've gone in. And it happened to be at the front of a 7-Eleven on a corner. I can't remember the intersection, but I looked at him and I thought to myself, you know what, I'll kick a couple of bucks in towards this guy. So what I did was I walked into the store, grabbed the bottle of water and a sandwich, and I brought it out to him. Rather than give him cash where he could end up just feeding a habit like drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or whatever, I physically presented it in the form of food. Okay, I thought I felt better for that, but I had a say as to how my money was going to be used. I think that was my answer to that. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah.
But anyway, do you have to go, mate? Or
I might let you go there, but I'd love to. I would really love to get you back on the show, and we'll do a little debate with someone on the left.
Yep. Look, I'll try and do something with my hair next time. All right. Okay.
No, you're looking great, and no, it's been great getting to know you. You're a lovely guy.
Grey or great?
No, great, but
good.
You're a silver fox. Don't worry.
Yeah. Oh well, look, thanks, buddy. The silver fox, gee. Okay. Yeah, that's it. The kids used to ask me, sir, you're going grey. I said, no, it's silver highlights, buddy. Silver highlights.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right, mate. Look, the wind up. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to talk to you. I think
no
what
worries.
you're doing is fantastic. I want to wish you all the best with the YouTube channel. I love it, mate. I think some of the topics you bring up really, really get people thinking out there. You catch them off guard as well. And you can almost see the cogs spinning around in their head going, I'm disappointed sometimes. I can't believe that such a vital topic or an important topic doesn't even get, an answer. That's the shame of it all, that there are people walking amongst us thinking that way or not thinking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And these guys, like I said, are going to be at a polling booth in the next few months or so. Look, my father used to say a couple of things. He used to say, you vote pretty much according to your wallet. Look at who's going to best support your wallet and go with that.
Yeah.
And like I said, for many years of my life, it used to be the guys in the red corner. But like I said, mate, for obvious reasons, I spoke to you about this whole property bullshit of being a landlord. There's no return on investment. I can't keep raising rents. I've been selling, and I'll do again another one next financial year. And I say this to the government: you house them. I'm not. Okay, I provide 90% of the product. Okay, and if you're going to demonise and punish me as a property investor, well, stuff you. You go house them. All right. And furthermore, if you keep bringing them in by the millions every couple of bloody years, I mean, what do you expect? So, that's my answer to them, mate. I'll go invest elsewhere. Okay?
Yeah.
I'll look at super. I'll look at shares. I'll look at any other form of investment, but property is a joke. I've made my money in property, fortunately. before this sort of crap has come along. And like I said to you before, I gave you the example of a stat deck. I had to get that signed with a reason to evict the tenants. I mean, it's my property, mate.
Yeah.
I've got to give you a reason. You know, who owns the bloody thing? Clearly the government does, mate. They've got more of a say in it, and the tenants have got more of a say in it. They brought out 132 plus new laws about a year and a half ago. Do you reckon any of those laws are about the landlord?
No, probably not.
No, I would say to you that most of those, if not all of them, are pretty much about what the tenant can do and what they can't do, and what I'm hamstrung by as a landlord. And as I said to you, mate, it's the haves and the have-nots, and you know what? They don't want me having one more. That's the other thing about socialism, right? They don't want you doing well, all right? I'm speaking general terms here, but the better you do, the less likely you are to vote for them. It's as simple as that. The more money you accrue, the more wealth, the less likely you are to look to the left, mate. You're going to be looking the other way. You're going to hang on to your money, be conservative, and look at ways of keeping your money rather than having these people sticking their fingers in your portfolio. Okay, and that's what the left tend to want to do. Okay, so in simple general terms, that's the way I feel about politics, if I had to sum it up. And remember the comment Holly Valance said, mate, start off on the left, but you end up on the right and realise how crap it was thinking what you thought.
Yeah. No, well, look, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Chris, and I'd love to speak again soon, and I'll be in touch, and we'll organise something.
Let me know, mate. It's been my pleasure, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity, buddy. I'm going to sign off because I've been on here long enough, and I've obviously deafened you to some degree. But no,
it's been great. It's been an awesome conversation.
It's been great to talk to you, mate, and share some comments and points of view about things that concern us all. And like I said, I don't have the answers to anything. I'm just pointing out, and as this is the whole idea of this is people putting out their opinions, mate, and that's all it is, isn't it?
Yeah, okay? Absolutely. All right, you look after yourself, Chris. We'll be in touch.
Take care, buddy. Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.